Let's talk about the man who wrote half the New Testament but never met Jesus. If Jesus was the answer, why did God need Paul to explain the question? As a kid, I used to think Paul and the apostles were on the same team. Peter, James, and John reaching the Jews, Paul handling the Gentiles, all working for one gospel and the greater good of God. But the deeper I read as an adult, the less this adds up. Let's peel this layer, starting with Paul's character. Paul says, "I'm not lying," a lot. Why say it so often unless people doubted you?
Then he drops this in Romans 3.
But if through my falsehood God's truth abounds to his glory, why am I still being condemned? So even if I lied, it's fine if it helps the cause? That's not reassuring. Next, the arrogance. If anyone else thinks he has reason to boast, I have more. I'm not inferior to those so-called super apostles. I worked harder than all of them. Jesus taught humility, but Paul constantly flexes. He even downplays the original disciples. In Galatians, as for those who were held in high esteem, whatever they were makes no difference to me. They added nothing to my message. That's Peter, James, and John he's talking about. In Galatians, Paul says he rebukes Peter to his face, says James' men are causing trouble, even calls them false brothers.
Is that unity or civil war?
Paul wasn't one of the 12. He wasn't there for the Sermon on the Mount. He never walked with Jesus, and yet Paul's voice is louder than anyone else in Christian theology. Let's compare their teachings. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish the law." But Paul writes, "You are not under the law, but under grace." A person is not justified by works of the law. All who rely on the law are under a curse. If you get circumcised, Christ is of no value to you. So let me get this straight. Jesus says the law still stands. Paul says the law brings a curse. Jesus taught Torah observance. Paul dropped kosher, circumcision, and the Sabbath. Jesus fulfilled the law. Paul seems to undo it. Continuation or contradiction? Paul also says, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received from me, let them be cursed. But Jesus says, anyone who loosens even the least of the law will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. So who's cursed and who's least? If Jesus preached one thing and Paul preached another, is Jesus cursed by Paul's standards? And is Paul least by Jesus's? Paul rarely quotes Jesus. No mention of his parables, no reference to his miracles, only 2 direct quotes in 13 letters. Yet Paul calls himself the apostle. His gospel becomes the foundation. His theology dominates the New Testament. Today's Christianity, justification by faith, original sin, the inner war between flesh and spirit, that's Paul, not Jesus. If Jesus is Lord, why is Paul the one doing all the talking?
If the earliest followers didn't preach Paul's gospel, what was the original message?
And how much of what we call Christianity came not from the man who walked on water, but from the man who claimed a vision and spent a lifetime defending it? As always, don't take my word for it. Search the text, compare the red letters to Paul's, and ask yourself, who are we really following?